The wind howled through the Sierra Nevada like a wounded beast, carrying with it sheets of snow that cut through Elias Boone's worn coat like 1,000 tiny knives. His boots, more whole than leather now, crunched through the fresh powder as he stumbled forward, each step a testament to either determination or foolishness. He could no longer tell which. 3 days. 3 days since his last proper meal, unless you counted the handful of pine nuts he'd managed to dig from beneath the snow yesterday morning. His fingers, wrapped in what remained of an old flour sack, had long since gone numb. The pickaxe strapped to his back felt heavier with each passing hour, a cruel reminder of his failures in these unforgiving mountains. Elias paused, leaning against a frost-covered pine to catch his breath. At 42, he was no longer the young man who'd first come west with dreams of fortune. The gold rush had made fools of better men than him, and after losing Samuel, his younger brother, in that cave-in last spring, he'd lost more than just a mining partner. He'd lost the last person who gave a damn whether he lived or died. The memory of Sam's laugh echoed in the wind, and Elias shook his head violently to dispel it. No good came from dwelling on the dead, not out here, where the living barely managed to scrape by. He pushed off from the tree and continued his descent toward what he hoped was the valley floor. One more day, he told himself. One more day of searching, and then he'd head back to Hope's End, sell his tools, and maybe catch a ride east. There was nothing for him here anymore. The mountain had taken everything. That's when he saw it, a flash of something unnatural in the white landscape. Elias blinked hard. Sure, his eyes were playing tricks. But no, there it was again. Yellow, bright, unmistakable yellow catching the weak winter sun. His feet moved before his mind could process what he was seeing. He half ran, half slid down the embankment, sending a small avalanche of snow cascading below. The loose rocks beneath gave way suddenly, and Elias felt the world tilt. His shoulder slammed into something hard, a boulder, maybe, and pain shot through his left arm like lightning. When the world stopped spinning, he found himself at the bottom of a small ravine, snow in his mouth and blood seeping through his coat sleeve. But none of that mattered, because there, exposed by the landslide he'd caused, was a vein of gold running through the rock face like God's own signature. Elias laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound that echoed off the canyon walls. After all these months, after Sam, after everything, he reached out with his good arm, fingers trembling as they traced the vein. It was real. Thick as his thumb in some places, spider webbing through the quartz in a pattern that made his heart race. Working through the pain, he managed to chip off a few samples with his pick, stuffing them deep in his coat pockets. His left arm hung useless at his side, but adrenaline kept him moving. He needed to mark this spot, needed to file a claim before anyone else stumbled upon it. The journey back to Hope's End took the rest of the day and most of his remaining strength. By the time the ramshackle buildings came into view, purple shadows stretched long across the snow, and Elias could barely keep his feet. Hope's End wasn't much to look at, a collection of weather-beaten structures huddled against the mountainside like they were trying to hide from God himself. The town had seen better days, back when the first strikes were made. Now it was home to the stubborn, the desperate, and those with nowhere else to go. Elias avoided Main Street, taking the back way past Murphy's saloon. The last thing he needed was questions from the regulars about where he'd been. His arm throbbed with each heartbeat, and dark spots danced at the edges of his vision. He'd made it past the abandoned blacksmith shop when his legs finally gave out. The world tilted again, and Elias found himself face down in the snow, the cold seeping through his clothes like death itself. "Lord, have mercy," a woman's voice cut through the gathering darkness. "You planning on dying on my doorstep, mister?" Elias managed to turn his head, squinting up at the figure silhouetted against the lamplight spilling from an open door. He knew that house, the Grayson place, and he knew the woman, too, though they'd never properly spoken. Clara Grayson, the widow who kept to herself and wanted nothing to do with the rough men who populated Hope's End. "I'll move along," he managed through chattering teeth. "Like hell you will." Her hands were surprisingly strong as they helped him sit up. "You're bleeding all over my front walk. Come on, then. Can't have you freezing to death where the whole town can see. They'll think I killed you for sure." The inside of her cabin was sparse but clean, a stark contrast to the filth and chaos of the boarding house where Elias usually stayed. She guided him to a chair near the stove, her movements efficient and purposeful. "That arm needs tending," Clara said, already reaching for a basket of clean rags. "Take off that coat." Elias hesitated. The gold samples were in his pockets, and in a town like Hope's End, even a whisper of a strike could turn neighbors into wolves. Clara seemed to read his mind. "I'm not interested in your secrets. Mr. Boone, just trying to keep you from bleeding all over my floor." So she knew his name. Elias supposed everyone knew everyone in a town this small, even if they didn't speak. He shrugged out of the coat carefully, biting back a groan as the movement jarred his shoulder. Clara worked in silence, cleaning the gash with water she'd heated on the stove. Her hands were gentle but sure. Speaking of experience with wounds, up close, Elias could see the lines around her eyes, the streak of premature gray in her dark hair. She couldn't be more than 35, but frontier life had a way of aging folks fast. "This needs stitching," she said finally. "You got anyone to do it for you?" Elias shook his head. "I can manage. With one hand? Don't be a fool." She was already threading a needle. "Drink this." She handed him a cup of something that smelled like paint thinner. "It'll help with the pain." The liquor burned going down, but it did dull the sharp edge of agony as she worked the needle through his skin. Elias focused on the wall behind her head, counting the knots in the wood planks. "There," Clara said at last, tying off the thread. "You'll live, though that arm will be useless for a week or two." "I'm obliged," Elias said, reaching for his coat. "You're not going anywhere tonight." Her tone brooked no argument. "Storm's coming in, and you've lost enough blood to make you stupid. More stupid than usual, anyway." Elias wanted to protest, but another wave of dizziness made the decision for him. Clara pointed to a cot in the corner. "That was my husband's. He won't be needing it." Everyone knew the story of Thomas Grayson, gunned down 2 years back over a poker debt. Clara had been left with nothing but this cabin and a reputation as a woman best left alone. As Elias settled onto the cot, exhaustion pulling at him like an undertow, Clara spoke again from across the room. "Whatever you're carrying in those pockets, Mr. Boone, you'd best keep it to yourself. This town's got a way of turning gold to blood faster than you can blink." Elias's hand moved involuntarily to his coat, and Clara shook her head. "I told you, I'm not interested, but I've lived here long enough to recognize the look of a man who's found something he shouldn't have. You want some advice? Either file your claim quiet-like and get out of town, or forget you ever saw anything. Those are the only 2 ways your story ends happy." She blew out the lamp, plunging the cabin into darkness save for the orange glow from the stove. "Get some rest. We'll figure out what to do with you come morning." Elias lay in the dark, listening to the wind pick up outside, rattling the windows like skeleton fingers. His arm throbbed in time with his heartbeat, but beneath the pain was something else. Hope, unfamiliar and dangerous as the gold hidden in his pockets. For the first time in months, he had something to lose, and across the cabin, barely visible in the stove's dying light, Clara Grayson sat in her chair, awake and watchful, as if she already knew that Elias Boone had brought more than just his bleeding body to her doorstep. He'd brought change, and in a place like Hope's End, change usually came with a price written in blood. The morning after the storm brought a world transformed in white, and Elias woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Clara moving quietly about the cabin. His arm ached something fierce, but the fever that had threatened during the night seemed to have broken. "You planning on lying there all day?" Clara asked without turning from the stove. "Coffee's ready, and there's cornbread if you can stomach it." Elias sat up slowly, testing his arm. The stitches held, though the movement sent sharp pains shooting to his shoulder. He made his way to the small table, accepting the cup she offered with his good hand. "I should be going," he said after a long sip. "Imposed enough on your hospitality. In this snow, with that arm?" Clara shook her head. You won't make it to the end of the street, much less wherever you're planning to go. She was right, and they both knew it. Outside, the snow fell steady and thick, already piling against the windows. Elias would need both arms to work his claim, and traveling in this weather would be asking for death. I can pay, he said quietly. For room and board. Clara's laugh was short and bitter. With what? Everyone knows Elias Boone hasn't had 2 coins to rub together since his brother died. The mention of Sam hit like a physical blow, but Elias kept his face neutral, without a word. He reached into his pocket and placed a small chunk of gold-laced quartz on the table between them. Clara went very still. She stared at the rock for a long moment, then carefully pushed it back toward him. Put that away, she said, her voice low. And don't be showing it around, not if you value your life. It's real, Elias said. Found a vein up in... I don't want to know where... Clara cut him off sharply. The less I know, the safer we both are. You keep your secrets, Mr. Boone, and I'll keep mine. They settled into an uneasy routine over the following days. Elias helped with what chores he could manage one-handed. Splitting kindling, hauling water from the well, tending the stove. Clara went about her business with the same quiet efficiency he'd observed that first night, speaking only when necessary. But the silences weren't entirely uncomfortable. After months alone in the mountains, just being near another person felt like warming cold hands by a fire. Sometimes he caught Clara watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, something unreadable in her dark eyes. On the 4th night, with his arm finally starting to heal properly, Elias found himself talking about Sam. It started with a simple question from Clara about the scar on his hand, and suddenly the words were pouring out, stories about their childhood in Missouri, the journey west, the dreams they'd shared. He was always the optimist, Elias said, staring into his coffee. Even when we hadn't eaten in 3 days, he'd be talking about what he'd do with his share of the gold. Build a house, he said, find himself a pretty wife, have a passel of kids. What happened? Clara asked softly. Cave-in. Spring thaw weakened the support beams. Elias's voice went flat. Took us 6 hours to dig him out. He was still alive when we found him, but... He shook his head. Doctor said his insides were all crushed up. Lasted 2 more days. Longest 2 days of my life. Clara reached across the table, her fingers barely brushing his hand before pulling back. I'm sorry. No one should have to watch family die like that. What about your husband? The question slipped out before Elias could stop it. Sorry, that's not... It's all right. Clara stood, moving to add wood to the stove. Thomas was a gambling man, always sure the next hand would be the big winner. Problem was, he started borrowing to cover his losses. When he couldn't pay, she shrugged. They found him behind Murphy's saloon, 3 bullets in his back. They ever catch who did it? Everyone knew who did it. Jake Morrison held the biggest marker, but knowing and proving are 2 different things out here. She turned back to face him. That's why I keep to myself now. That's why you should too. Once you leave here. And if I don't want to leave. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's eyes widened slightly, and Elias immediately wished he could take them back. You'll leave, she said finally. Men like you always do. Either the gold will run out, or someone will try to take it. Or you'll just get tired of looking over your shoulder. But you'll leave. That night, Elias lay awake on the cot, acutely aware of Clara's breathing across the room. The cabin felt smaller somehow, the space between them charged with something he didn't dare name. The next morning brought clearer skies, and Elias knew he couldn't put off returning to his claim much longer. He needed tools, supplies, and most importantly, he needed to file paperwork before someone else stumbled onto his find. I'll go with you, Clara said when he mentioned heading to town. Need supplies myself, and it'll look less suspicious if we're together. Folks will think you're helping me with errands. The walk to town was treacherous. Snow-packed paths turned to ice, more than once. Clara had to steady him when his boots slipped. Her hand on his good arm was warm, even through the layers of clothing. They stopped first at Henderson's general store, while Clara haggled with the old man over flower prices. Elias quietly purchased what he needed: a new pick, rope, canvas for shelter, and ammunition for the revolver he'd lost somewhere in the storm. "Planning a trip?" Henderson asked, his roomy eyes too sharp for Elias's liking. "Just replacing what the storm took," Elias replied, keeping his voice casual. "Outside?" Clara frowned at his purchases. "You're going back up there?" "Soon as this arm's healed enough. In winter? That's foolish even for you." "Can't wait for spring. Word gets out, and there'll be 100 men crawling over those hills." They were passing the assay office when Clara suddenly steered him into the alley beside it. "Listen to me," she said urgently. "If you're determined to do this, at least be smart about it. Don't file that claim under your own name. Use an alias, or better yet, find someone you trust to file it for you." "Someone like you?" Clara's laugh was harsh. "A widow filing a mining claim? Might as well paint a target on both our backs." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "There's a lawyer in Sacramento, Marcus Webb. He's discreet. Helped me with some matters after Thomas died. For a fee, he'll handle the paperwork. Keep your name out of it." "Why are you helping me?" Clara looked away. "Maybe I'm tired of seeing good men die for nothing in these hills. Maybe I just don't want to have to drag your frozen corpse off my doorstep come spring." That evening, back in the cabin, the atmosphere had shifted. They moved around each other carefully, like dancers trying not to touch. When their hands met passing a plate at dinner, both jerked back as if burned. "I'll be heading out tomorrow," Elias said finally. "Weather's clearing, and my arm's well enough." Clara nodded, not meeting his eyes. "That's good. That's for the best." But later, as Elias lay on the cot pretending to sleep, he heard her crying, soft, muffled sounds she was trying to hide. He wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, but he knew that would cross a line they'd both been careful to maintain. The next morning, Clara was composed again, helping him pack his supplies with brisk efficiency. She pressed a small cloth bundle into his hands. "Food for the journey," she said. "And there's a bottle of that rot gut for the pain. Try not to drink it all at once." "Clara, don't." She turned away. "Just be careful. And if things go bad, if you need somewhere safe." She gestured vaguely at the cabin. "You know where to find me." Elias shouldered his pack, the weight familiar and strange at the same time. At the door, he turned back. Clara stood by the stove, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. "I'll come back," he said. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Elias Boone." But as he walked away, snow crunching under his boots, Elias knew it wasn't a promise. It was something more dangerous, a declaration that whatever lay between them wasn't finished. And in a place like Hope's End, unfinished business had a way of turning deadly. Behind him, Clara watched from the window until his figure disappeared into the tree line. Then she sat down at the table and wrote a letter to Marcus Webb in Sacramento, her hand steady despite the tears that wouldn't stop falling. She'd told Elias she kept to herself for safety, but the truth was simpler and more complicated. She'd been alone so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to fear losing someone again. Now she remembered, and it terrified her more than any man with a gun ever could. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks later, on a morning when frost painted the windows of Clara's cabin like cemetery flowers. She was mending a torn dress when boots stomped on her porch. Too many boots, too heavy with purpose. "Mrs. Grayson?" The voice belonged to Bill Hutchins, a trapper who spent more time in Murphy's saloon than in the woods. "Got a moment?" Clara set aside her sewing, checking that the shotgun was within reach before opening the door. Hutchins stood there with 2 men she didn't recognize, rough-looking types with hungry eyes and hands that hovered near their guns. "What can I do for you, Mr. Hutchins?" "Well now, that's neighborly of you to ask." Hutchins grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "See, me and the boys here been hearing talk about your friend Boone." "I don't know what you mean, mister. Boone stayed here a few nights when he was injured. Christian charity. Nothing more. Christian charity, one of the strangers repeated, laughing. That what they're calling it now? Clara's hand tightened on the door. If you have business with Mr. Boone, I suggest you take it up with him. That's the thing, Hutchins said, leaning against her door frame. Can't seem to find him, but maybe you know where he's been spending his time? Heard he bought himself some fancy new equipment before he left town. I wouldn't know about that. Wouldn't you? The stranger stepped closer. See, old Henderson at the store. He remembers you being there when Boone made his purchases. Mighty cozy, you two. Clara forced herself to remain calm. I was buying flour. Nothing cozy about it. Now, if you'll excuse me, Hutchins' hand shot out, stopping the door from closing. Here's the thing. Mrs. Grayson, we know Boone found something up in those hills, and we know he's sweet on you. Man tells things to a woman he's sweet on. Get your hand off my door, Mr. Hutchins. Or what? You'll shoot us. The stranger laughed again. 3 of us, 1 of you. And who's going to care if something happens to Tom Grayson's widow? Everyone knows what kind of woman takes up with a drifter weeks after playing nurse. The click of Clara cocking the shotgun through the door was loud in the morning air. I said, get your hand off my door. Hutchins stepped back, but his smile remained. This ain't over. Mrs. Grayson, Boone's got something we want, and one way or another, we'll get it. They left, but Clara knew they'd be back. She barred the door and sat by the window, shotgun across her lap, watching the tree line. As the sun climbed higher, she made a decision that went against every instinct for self-preservation she'd developed since Thomas died. She had to warn Elias. That night, Clara did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She saddled her old mare and rode out of Hope's End under cover of darkness. She knew the general direction Elias had taken, and miners were creatures of habit. They returned to the same areas, following geological patterns like prayers. The moon was high when she finally saw the flicker of a campfire in a ravine below. Clara approached carefully, knowing that surprising an armed man in the wilderness rarely ended well. Elias? She called softly. It's Clara. Don't shoot. The figure by the fire spun around, rifle raised, then lowered it slowly. Clara, what in God's name are you doing here? She dismounted, legs shaky from the long ride. Hutchins came by. Him and 2 others I didn't know. They're asking questions. Alice was beside her in an instant, helping her to the fire. Up close, she could see the past weeks had been hard on him. His clothes were filthy, his face gaunt, but his eyes blazed with something that might have been fever or fortune. You shouldn't have come, he said, even as he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. These hills aren't safe. Neither is town. Clara accepted the cup of coffee he offered, wrapping her hands around its warmth. They know you found something. They threatened. She stopped, unwilling to repeat the ugly words. Elias's jaw tightened. I'll head back with you. If Hutchins wants to make trouble. No. Clara grabbed his arm. That's what they want. You show up, they'll follow you right back here. Or worse, they'll just shoot you and take their chances finding the claim themselves. Then what do you suggest? Clara looked around the simple camp, the canvas shelter, the pile of rocks that surely contained gold ore, the tools worn from daily use. How much have you taken out? Enough, Elias said carefully. More than enough. If I can get it to an assay office without getting killed. The lawyer I mentioned, Webb. He has connections in San Francisco. If we can get the gold to him, he can handle everything, sale, banking, paperwork. Make it all legal and proper before anyone in Hope's End knows what happened. We. Clara met his gaze steadily. You can't do this alone. Not anymore. Something shifted in Elias's face. Clara, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling. She stood, pacing nervously. But there's a price for my help. Name it. Take me with you. When you leave Hope's End, I've got nothing there but a cabin full of ghosts and men who think a widow's fair game. Elias stood too, moving closer. Is that the only reason? Because you need protection? The question hung between them like morning mist. Clara could lie, could keep things simple and safe. Instead, she spoke the truth. You know it's not. Elias reached out, his calloused fingers gentle on her cheek. I've thought about you every day, every night. Wondered if I was fooling myself, thinking you might. Clara silenced him with a kiss. 3 weeks of fear and loneliness and want pouring out in that single moment. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. She saw her own desperate hope reflected in his eyes. This is dangerous, she whispered. What we're doing, what we're feeling, it's all dangerous. Everything out here's dangerous, Elias replied, pulling her closer. But some things are worth the risk. They spent that night huddled together by the fire, planning and dreaming in equal measure. Clara would return to town, act normal, while Elias worked to extract as much gold as possible over the next week. Then they'd meet at the old stage road, travel to Sacramento together, and let Webb handle the legal matters. After that? Clara asked, her head on his shoulder. After that, we go wherever you want. San Francisco, Oregon, hell, even back east if that's what you're after. I don't care where, Clara said, as long as it's away from here. But as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky the color of fool's gold, they both knew it wouldn't be that simple. Hope's End didn't let go of its people easily, and men like Hutchins didn't give up when they smelled profit. Clara left before full daylight, taking a different route back to town. Elias watched until she disappeared over the ridge, then turned back to his claim with renewed purpose. He had more than gold to protect now. He had a future, and that was worth more than all the metal in the Sierra Nevada. Back in Hope's End, Clara went about her routine, buying supplies, nodding to neighbors, pretending everything was normal. But Hutchins was watching. She could feel his eyes following her movements, could see his men lurking in doorways and alleys. On the third day, things escalated. Clara woke to find her chickens dead, their necks wrung, bodies arranged in a grotesque message on her porch. The next night, rocks shattered her windows. No one saw anything. No one would help. Sheriff Anderson, fat and useless behind his desk, barely looked up when she reported the incidents. Boys will be boys. Mrs. Grayson. Maybe if you were more friendly-like, they wouldn't feel the need to act out. Clara left the sheriff's office with her head high, but inside she was counting the hours until she could escape this poisonous town. On the appointed day, she packed only what she could carry, leaving everything else behind. The cabin had been her prison for 2 years. She felt no sorrow in abandoning it. But as she reached the meeting spot on the old stage road, Clara's heart sank. Elias wasn't there. An hour passed, then 2. The sun began its descent behind the mountains, and still no sign of him. Then she heard it, horses approaching fast. Clara hid in the brush, hand on her pistol, praying it was Elias but fearing it wasn't. 3 riders appeared, and her worst fears were confirmed. Hutchins led the group, his face triumphant. Behind him, Elias sat slumped in his saddle, hands tied, blood trailing from a cut on his forehead. Mrs. Grayson, Hutchins called out. I know you're out there. Come on out now, and we'll make this easy. Clara stayed hidden, mind racing. 3 men, all armed, and Elias already captured. The odds were impossible. Here's the thing, Hutchins continued, dismounting. Your man here, he's been real stubborn about sharing the location of his claim, but I'm betting he'll be more talkative if we have you to persuade him. Elias raised his head, eyes searching the brush. When he spotted her hiding place, he gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Don't, his eyes said. Run! But Clara Grayson had been running all her life, from poverty, from her husband's debts, from the emptiness that threatened to swallow her whole. She was tired of running. She stepped out of the brush, pistol raised. Let him go, Hutchins. The men laughed. Or what? You'll shoot one of us? Maybe, but not all 3. Maybe not. Clara agreed. But I'll start with you, and I'm a very good shot. The laughter died. Hutchins studied her, seeing something in her eyes that gave him pause. Here was a woman with nothing left to lose, and those were the most dangerous kind. "Now hold on," he started, but Clara cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to cut Elias loose. Then you're going to get on your horses and ride back to Hope's End. And if I ever see any of you again, I'll put a bullet in you without a word of warning." "You're bluffing." Clara's shot took off Hutchins's hat, the sound echoing off the mountains. "Next one goes between your eyes." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, one of the other men dismounted and cut Elias's bonds. "This ain't over," Hutchins snarled, but he was already backing toward his horse. "Yes, it is," Clara said. "Because if anything happens to us, if we die in an accident or disappear mysterious-like, there's a letter with a lawyer in Sacramento. Names, dates, everything. You kill us, you hang for it." It was a lie, but Hutchins didn't know that. He mounted his horse, face twisted with rage. "You've made a mistake, woman. Both of you have." They rode off in a cloud of dust and curses. Only when they were out of sight did Clara lower the pistol, her hands finally beginning to shake. Elias stumbled to her, pulling her into his arms. "That was the bravest, most foolish thing I've ever seen. I couldn't let them take you," Clara said into his chest. "Not when we're so close. They'll be back, maybe not today, but soon. Then we'd better not be here." They rode through the night, pushing their horses hard, the gold-heavy saddlebags slowing their progress. By dawn they were miles from Hope's End, but both knew that distance alone wouldn't keep them safe. The mountains had eyes, and greed had a long memory. As the sun rose over the Sierra Nevada, painting the peaks gold and crimson, Elias and Clara faced the truth. They were fugitives now, running from men who would kill for what they carried. But they were together, and that made all the difference. "No regrets?" Elias asked as they paused to rest the horses. Clara looked back the way they'd come, then forward to the unknown trail ahead. "None," she said, and meant it. Whatever came next, it had to be better than the slow death of life in Hope's End. They mounted up and continued on, two souls against the wilderness, carrying a fortune in gold and something even more precious, the fragile hope of love in a land that consumed the weak and the lonely without mercy. Sacramento brought no peace, only a different kind of danger. The letter Clara had sent to Marcus Webb had gone unanswered, and when they arrived at his office, they found out why. Webb had been dead for 2 months, shot in what the local papers called a dispute over legal fees. "We need another plan," Clara said as they stood outside the shuttered law office, their horses and gold hidden at a livery stable on the edge of town. Elias scanned the busy street, noting how many hard-eyed men seemed to be watching them. "The assay office. We'll sell what we can, quick-like, and get out." But word traveled faster than they'd hoped. By the time they reached Morrison's assay and exchange, a small crowd had gathered. Prospectors had a sixth sense for gold, and 2 dust-covered travelers trying to look inconspicuous might as well have been ringing dinner bells. Inside, the assayer, a thin man named Cornelius Morrison, no relation to Jake Morrison back in Hope's End, he assured them, weighed their samples with shaking hands. This is exceptional quality. Where did you say you found this?" "We didn't," Elias replied curtly. "What's it worth?" Morrison named a figure that made Clara's breath catch. It was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. It was also enough to get them killed a dozen times over. "I'll need a day to gather that much currency," Morrison said. "Unless you'd prefer a bank draft." "Cash." Elias said, "Half now, half tomorrow." They left with a portion of their fortune, but Clara could feel the eyes following them. By the time they reached their boarding house, a modest establishment Clara had chosen specifically for its multiple exits, she was certain they were being tracked. "We can't stay here," she said once their door was barred. "They'll come for us tonight." Elias was already loading his revolver. "Then we leave now. Forget the rest of the gold." "No." Clara's voice was firm. "We've come too far to give up now, but we need to be smart about it." Her plan was simple but risky. They would split up. Elias would take what gold they'd already converted and head for the train station, buying tickets for San Francisco. Clara would return to the assay office in the morning, collect the remainder, and meet him at a hotel near the wharf. "I don't like it," Elias said. "We should stay together. Together we're too obvious. Apart, we might have a chance." That night, neither slept. They sat by the window, watching the street, hands clasped like they were already saying goodbye. When footsteps finally echoed on the stairs around midnight, they were ready. The door exploded inward, and 3 men rushed in, not Hutchins' group, but strangers with the same hungry look. Elias's first shot took one in the shoulder, spinning him around. Clara fired through the window she'd already opened, the sound drawing shouts from the street. "Go!" Elias shoved the gold-heavy saddlebags at her. "Backstairs!" They fled through the boarding house's maze of hallways, the sounds of pursuit close behind. In the alley, their horses waited. Clara had insisted on keeping them saddled, just in case. They rode hard through Sacramento's dark streets, shots echoing behind them. A bullet whistled past Clara's ear, and she bent lower over her mare's neck. They splashed through the American River at a shallow crossing, the cold water shocking their horses into an extra burst of speed. By dawn, they'd put miles between themselves and Sacramento, but their horses were blown, and they needed rest. They found shelter in an abandoned barn, collapsing in the hay while keeping watch through gaps in the walls. "So much for our clean getaway," Elias said, pressing a cloth to a graze on his arm Clara hadn't noticed before. "Let me see that." She moved closer, their bodies naturally finding each other in the dim light. As she cleaned the wound, she became aware of how close they were, how his breath stirred her hair. "Clara," he said softly, and she looked up to find his face inches from hers. The kiss was different from their first, desperate, tinged with the knowledge that they might not survive this. When Elias's hands tangled in her hair, when Clara pressed closer despite every rational thought screaming danger, it was as if they were trying to claim this moment against all the forces trying to tear them apart. They made a bed in the hay, their need for each other overcoming exhaustion and fear. In the half-light of the barn, with danger potentially minutes away, they came together with an intensity born of near death and uncertain futures. Every touch was a promise, every whispered word a defiance of the violence that stalked them. Afterwards, they lay entwined, listening to the morning birds and the distant sounds of pursuit that never quite faded. "I'm sorry," Elias said finally. "I brought this on you. The gold, the danger, all of it." Clara raised herself on one elbow to look at him. "You brought me back to life. I was dead in that cabin. Elias, just going through the motions, waiting for, I don't even know what. You gave me something to fight for. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." She kissed him fiercely. "We're going to get through this. We're going to take our gold and disappear somewhere they'll never find us." But even as she said it, they both heard the horses approaching. They dressed quickly, silently, weapons ready. Through the barn walls, Clara counted at least 6 riders, moving slowly, checking every building. "There," one called out. "Fresh tracks leading to that barn." Elias and Clara exchanged a look. 6 men, maybe more. Their ammunition was running low, their horses exhausted. The odds were impossible. "You could still walk away," Elias whispered. "Tell them I forced you, that I kidnapped you. They might believe it." Clara's answer was to check her rifle. "We go together or not at all." The barn door creaked open. A figure appeared, silhouetted against the morning light. But instead of Hutchins or the Sacramento thugs, it was someone unexpected. Sheriff Anderson from Hope's End, his fat face red from hard riding. Well, Anderson wheezed. "The lovebirds, you've led us on quite a chase." "Since when do you leave Hope's End?" Clara asked, her rifle trained on his chest. "Since Jake Morrison put a $1,000 bounty on your heads, that's enough to make even a lazy lawman ambitious." Anderson stepped aside, revealing the men behind him. Hutchins was there, grinning like a wolf, along with faces Clara recognized from town. Men who'd tipped their hats to her on the street, who'd known her husband. "Here's how this is going to go," Anderson continued. "You tell us where the claim is. We take you back to Hope's End nice and peaceful like. Maybe you even live to stand trial." "Trial for what?" Elias demanded. "Finding gold ain't illegal." "No, but killing the men I left to watch your claim is—" Hutchins spoke up, his grin widening. "Funny how they turned up dead just before you ran off with the widow." Clara felt Elias tense beside her. It was a lie, but that wouldn't matter. Out here, accusations were as good as proof if the accusers had enough guns. "We didn't kill anyone," Clara said. "We've been running from you, not the other way around. Tell it to the judge." "Oh, wait," Anderson chuckled. "I am the judge in Hope's End. Ain't that convenient?" More men appeared, surrounding the barn. Clara counted 10, maybe 12. Even if she and Elias took down half of them, they'd never make it out alive. "I'll make you a deal," Elias said suddenly. "Let Clara go. She doesn't know where the claim is. I'll take you there myself. Show you everything." "No," Clara turned on him. "Don't you dare." "Touching," Hutchins interrupted. "But we'll take you both. Morrison wants to make an example. Can't have folks thinking they can strike it rich and not share with the town. Can we?" Clara felt the walls closing in, both literally and figuratively. All their struggles, all their dreams, ending in a dusty barn surrounded by greedy men with guns. She thought of the night she'd spent in Elias's arms, of the future they'd imagined together, and rage filled her. "You want the gold that bad?" she called out. "Fine. It's hidden under the third fence post from the left, back of my property in Hope's End. Whole chest of it, more than we could carry." The men exchanged glances. Anderson frowned. "You're lying." "Am I? We had to stash it somewhere before we ran. Go check if you don't believe me." Clara's voice was steady, convincing. "But you better hurry. Won't take long for word to get out, and then you'll be fighting the whole town for it." She saw the greed war with suspicion in their faces. A chest of gold, just sitting there for the taking. It was too good to pass up. "Hutchins, take 5 men and check it out," Anderson ordered. "We'll keep these 2 here until you get back." As Hutchins and his group rode off, Clara felt Elias's hand find hers. He squeezed once. He understood. She'd just cut the odds in half. They waited in tense silence, the remaining men growing restless. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, one of the younger guns spoke up. "What if Hutchins found the gold and took off? What if he ain't coming back?" The seed of doubt, once planted, grew quickly. Men who'd ride together for profit would turn on each other just as fast. Anderson tried to maintain control, but Clara could see him sweating. "Maybe we should go check," another suggested. "Make sure Hutchins ain't double-crossing us." "Nobody's going anywhere," Anderson snapped. But his authority was crumbling. That's when Clara made her move. "There is no gold in Hope's End," she said calmly. "I lied, but by now, Hutchins has torn apart half the town looking for it. Wonder how folks will feel about that." The explosion of curses and accusations gave them their chance. In the chaos, Elias kicked over a lantern, sending flames racing through the dry hay. Smoke filled the barn in seconds. Clara and Elias burst through the back wall, rotted boards giving way under their combined weight. Gunfire erupted behind them, but the smoke and confusion made aiming impossible. They ran for the tree line, bullets whining past. Clara felt something tug at her dress, heard Elias grunt beside her, but they kept running. The woods embraced them, thick and concealing. Behind them, shouts mixed with the roar of flames as the barn became an inferno. They'd bought themselves time, but not much. "You hit?" Clara gasped as they paused to catch their breath. "Scratched," Elias said, though his hand came away bloody from his side. "You?" "I'm fine. We need to keep moving." They stumbled deeper into the forest, the sounds of pursuit fading but never disappearing entirely. Every snap of a twig, every bird call, might herald their deaths. As the sun climbed higher, they found a stream and followed it, hoping to lose their scent. Clara supported more and more of Elias's weight, his scratch clearly more serious than he'd admitted. Just a little farther, she urged, though she had no idea where they were going. That's when they saw it. A cabin tucked into a hillside, smoke rising from its chimney. Clara hesitated. It could be salvation or another trap. But Elias was fading fast. His breathing labored. She had no choice. "Help!" Clara called out. "Please, we need help!" The door opened, and an old man emerged, rifle in hand. His eyes took in their condition. The blood, the desperation. "Running from the law?" he asked. "From men who think they are the law." Clara replied, "Please, he's hurt." The old man studied them for a long moment, then lowered his rifle. "Come on, then. Wouldn't be the first time I helped folks the law was hunting, named Samuel Boone." Elias's head snapped up. "Samuel, but you're dead. The cave-in." The old man's weathered face creased in confusion, then understanding. "Elias, good Lord, is that you, boy?" As Elias collapsed, his brother, very much alive, caught him, and Clara found herself hoping that maybe, just maybe, their luck had finally turned. The cabin was small but sturdy, hidden so well in the hillside that pursuers could pass within 50 feet and never see it. Samuel worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning and binding Elias's wound while Clara boiled water and tore strips from her petticoat for bandages. The bullet passed through. Samuel announced, "Lucky, another inch to the left." He shook his head. Boy always did have more luck than sense. Elias, pale but conscious, gripped his brother's arm. "Sam, how? We dug for hours. They said you were crushed." Samuel's face darkened. "Wasn't me they dug out. Was my partner, Pete Henley. Poor bastard was wearing my coat. I'd loaned it to him that morning 'cause his was torn. When the ceiling came down," he paused, pouring whiskey over the wound, ignoring Elias's hiss of pain. "I was in another shaft, heard the collapse. By the time I dug myself out, they'd already identified the body as mine. But why didn't you come back? Why let me think? Because I found something in that other shaft. Eli. Something worth staying dead for." Samuel glanced at Clara. "You trust her?" "With my life," Elias said without hesitation. Samuel nodded slowly. "Then I guess she's family now." He moved to a corner of the cabin, pried up a floorboard, and pulled out a leather pouch. Gold dust spilled across the rough table, gleaming in the lamplight. "Been mining that shaft for near 2 years now, slow and careful, taking just enough to survive, not enough to draw attention." Clara stared at the gold, then at the brothers. "This is why they never found your body? You've been here all along." "Safer to be dead," Samuel said. "Dead men don't have claims jumped. Dead men don't get shot for their gold." He looked pointedly at Elias's bandaged side. Least that was the theory. Over the next hours, as Elias rested, Samuel told his story. The cave-in had been no accident. He'd overheard Jake Morrison's men talking about weakening the support beams. They'd wanted the Boone brothers gone. Suspected they were close to a strike. "I figured if they thought they'd succeeded, killed one of us, they'd leave the other alone. So I stayed dead, kept working." His weathered face twisted with regret. "Didn't know they'd keep after you, Eli. Didn't know you'd blame yourself." "All this time," Elias murmured. "All this time I've been carrying the weight of your death." "Well, now you can put it down," Samuel said gruffly. "Though from the looks of things, you've picked up some new troubles." Clara told him everything. The strike Elias had found, Hutchins and his men, the flight from Hope's End, the ambush at the barn. Samuel listened, occasionally glancing out the window, his hand never far from his rifle. "Morrison's behind it all," he said when she finished. "Has been from the start. He owns half of Hope's End, the saloon, the assay office, even has Sheriff Anderson in his pocket. Anyone strikes gold, Morrison finds a way to take it." "Then we can't go back," Clara said. "Not ever." Wouldn't be so sure about that. Samuel moved to the window, studying the forest. "Men like Morrison, they're like wolves. Show weakness, run away, and they'll chase you forever. Stand and fight, though." He trailed off, then turned to face them. How much gold you two carrying? Elias struggled to sit up. Maybe 20,000 worth. Less whatever we lost running. Samuel whistled low. That'll bring every wolf in the territory. No wonder they're hunting so hard. He was quiet for a moment, thinking, there's a way to end this. Dangerous. But it might be your only chance. We're listening, Clara said. Morrison's greed is his weakness. What if we give him what he wants, or make him think we are? Draw him out, away from his protection, his hired guns. Samuel's eyes glinted. Then we end it, permanent-like. You're talking about murder. Clara said quietly. I'm talking about survival. You think Morrison will ever stop hunting you? You could run to China and he'd send men after you, long as he thinks you have gold he could claim. Samuel looked at his brother. Sometimes, to protect what matters, you gotta do things that stain your soul. Elias was quiet for a long moment, then looked at Clara. What do you think? She thought of the life growing inside her, a secret she hadn't shared yet, barely acknowledged to herself. She thought of the future they'd dreamed of, the peace they'd never have with Morrison's shadow over them. I think, she said slowly, that we've run far enough. They spent the rest of the day planning. Samuel knew Morrison's habits, his weaknesses. Every Sunday, the man rode out to his private claim with just 2 guards, checking on his operations. The trail passed through Devil's Canyon, a narrow passage with high walls and only one way out. We'll need to destroy the gold, Samuel said, or at least make Morrison think we have. Man won't come himself if he thinks there's still fortune to be gained by sending others. Elias nodded grimly. The old mine shaft near Falcon's Peak. We could stage a cave-in, make it look like the gold's buried under a mountain of rock. And if Morrison doesn't believe it? Clara asked. Then we convince him the only way left, Elias said, checking his revolver. That night, as Samuel kept watch, Clara and Elias lay together on a narrow cot, careful of his wounded side. In the darkness, Clara finally spoke her secret. I'm carrying your child. Elias went very still. Clara, are you certain? As certain as a woman can be. She placed his hand on her still flat stomach, started feeling the signs a few weeks back. My God. His voice was full of wonder and fear. Clara, we can't. This changes everything. You can't be part of what we're planning. It's too dangerous. This is exactly why I have to be part of it, she said fiercely. I won't raise our child in fear. I won't have him or her looking over their shoulder, wondering when Morrison's men will come. We end this, Elias. We end it for good. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. I love you, he whispered. God help me. I love you more than I ever thought possible. Then help me give our child a future, she whispered back. Help me make us free. 2 days later, they put their plan in motion. Clara rode into Hope's End alone, her dress torn, dirt on her face, playing the part of a desperate woman. She stumbled into the sheriff's office, where Anderson sat cleaning his nails. Sheriff, she gasped. There's been an accident. The mine. Elias. Anderson was on his feet instantly. Where? What happened? Falcon's Peak. He was trying to move the gold, hide it in an old shaft. The supports gave way. Clara let tears stream down her face. Not entirely an act, given the circumstances. He's trapped. The gold. It's all buried with him. Within an hour, word had spread through town. Morrison himself appeared, flanked by 4 men, his face a mask of calculated concern. Mrs. Grayson, he said smoothly. How terrible. And the location of this tragedy? Clara gave him directions, watched his eyes light with greed. Even if Elias was dead, the gold could be dug out. Morrison ordered most of his men to gather equipment, to prepare for excavation. I'll go ahead, he announced. Scout the situation. Hutchins, bring 2 men and follow. He looked at Clara. You'll show us the exact spot, of course. Of course. Clara agreed. Knowing this was what they'd planned for, the ride to Falcon's Peak took 3 hours. Clara led them along the predetermined route, through Devil's Canyon where the walls pressed close and the shadows lay thick. Morrison rode behind her, confident in his coming victory. They never saw Samuel positioned in the rocks above. His first shot took one guard from his saddle. The second went wide as Morrison's horse reared. Elias appeared at the canyon's narrow exit, rifle raised, and shot the second guard before he could clear his weapon. Morrison fought to control his mount, reaching for his gun, but Clara had already turned her horse, her pistol trained on him. "Don't," she said quietly. Hutchins, caught in the middle, made a desperate choice. He spurred his horse toward Elias, gun drawn. 2 rifles spoke as one. Samuel from above, Elias from below. Hutchins tumbled from his saddle, clutching his chest, and lay still. Morrison sat very still, calculating. 3 guns on him, nowhere to run. "Well played," he said finally. "Though I wonder if you've thought this through. Kill me, and my men will tear this territory apart looking for you. Your men are mercenaries." Samuel called down. "Without you to pay them, they'll drift to the next town. The next boss, you're not as important as you think." "Perhaps." Morrison's eyes fixed on Clara. "But can you do it, Mrs. Grayson? Can you shoot an unarmed man in cold blood? You're not a killer." Clara thought of her husband, dead behind Murphy's saloon, of the nights she'd spent alone and afraid, of the child growing inside her who deserved better than a life spent running. "You're right," she said. "I'm not a killer." She lowered her gun slightly. "But I am a survivor." Morrison smiled, already reaching for the hideout gun in his vest. He was fast, but not fast enough. Clara's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him from his horse. He hit the ground hard. Weapon flying from his hand, Elias dismounted, kicked Morrison's gun away. The man lay gasping, blood spreading across his expensive shirt. "You could have ridden away," Clara said, standing over him. "Could have let us go. But you couldn't, could you? The greed wouldn't let you." Morrison laughed, a wet, bitter sound. "You think you've won. You think this ends it. There'll be others. There's always others when there's gold involved." "Maybe," Samuel said, climbing down from his perch. "But they'll have to find it first." They left Morrison there, wounded but alive. Death would come slow in Devil's Canyon, from blood loss or thirst or the wolves that hunted these hills. It was more mercy than he'd shown others. But Clara couldn't bring herself to deliver a killing shot. Let the mountain claim him, as it had claimed so many. Back at Samuel's cabin, they made their final preparations. The gold was divided 3 ways, hidden in different locations known only to them. Some they buried. Some they converted to bank drafts under false names. Some they sewed into the linings of ordinary clothes. "Where will you go?" Samuel asked as they prepared to leave. "North," Elias said. "Oregon, maybe. Somewhere we can start fresh, where Clara can have the baby in peace." Samuel nodded. "I'll follow in a few months. Once the dust settles, once everyone forgets about dead Sam Boone." He embraced his brother. "Take care of each other." Clara kissed Samuel's weathered cheek. "Thank you for everything." "Thank you," he replied, "for bringing my brother back to me, even if it's just to say goodbye again." They left at dawn. 2 figures on horseback heading into an uncertain future. Behind them lay gold and ghosts, violence and loss. Ahead waited the unknown, but also hope and love and the promise of new life. As they crested the final ridge, Clara looked back one last time at the mountains that had brought them together and nearly torn them apart. Then she turned forward, reaching for Elias's hand. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing his question from days before. Clara thought of the child they'd made, of the life they'd chosen, of the freedom bought with blood and courage. "None," she said, and spurred her horse toward tomorrow. The mountains kept their secrets, and the gold slept undisturbed in the earth. And somewhere in Oregon Territory, months later, a child would be born to parents who'd learned that the greatest treasure wasn't metal torn from stone, but the love that survived the tearing. The Oregon rain fell like judgment on the small homestead, turning the yard to mud and making the simple wooden house feel like an ark adrift in a hostile sea. Clara stood at the window, one hand pressed to her swollen belly, watching the road that led to town. Elias had been gone since dawn. riding into Millbrook for supplies, and the familiar knot of worry had taken root in her chest. 6 months. 6 months since they'd fled California. Since Devil's Canyon and Morrison's blood on the rocks. They'd thought distance would bring peace, but some shadows stretched longer than others. He should be back by now, she murmured to the child within her, a habit she'd developed in the lonely hours. Your father's never late without reason. As if in response, she felt a flutter of movement, the baby turning, restless as its mother. Clara smiled despite her worry. The child was strong, active. The midwife in Millbrook said it would come within the month. Thunder rolled across the valley, and Clara was about to turn from the window when she saw them, 3 riders approaching through the rain. Her heart lifted, then sank. Elias would be alone. She moved quickly despite her condition, checking the rifle by the door, ensuring it was loaded. Old habits died hard. The pistol was in the kitchen drawer, cleaned and ready. They'd learned never to be caught unprepared. The riders stopped at the gate. Through the rain-blurred glass, Clara could make out Elias's familiar form, but the other 2, one was Reverend Aldrich from town. The other she didn't recognize. Elias entered first, water streaming from his coat, his face a mask of controlled tension. "Clara, we have visitors." Reverend Aldrich followed, a gaunt man whose kindness was tempered by the harsh realities of frontier life. The stranger remained on the porch, and Clara got her first good look at him, young, maybe 25, with the hollow eyes of someone who'd ridden hard and far. "Mrs. Boone," the Reverend said, using the name they'd adopted. "I apologize for the intrusion, but young Henry here has come a long way with news that concerns you both." Henry stepped forward, hat in hand. "Ma'am, my name's Henry Watson. I've ridden from Hope's End with a message from a woman named Martha Hutchins." Clara's blood turned cold. Hutchins, the man who died in Devil's Canyon. "I don't know any Martha Hutchins." "She said you'd say that," Henry continued. "She also said to tell you she knows what happened to her husband and to Jake Morrison. She knows, and so do others." Elias moved to Clara's side, hand resting on his gun. "What does she want?" "Justice," Henry said simply. "Or gold." "She says you can choose which." The silence stretched, broken only by rain drumming on the roof. Finally, Reverend Aldrich spoke. "I've counseled patience, told her vengeance serves no one, but she's grieving and desperate. Her children are hungry. The town is dying without Morrison's money flowing through it." Morrison was a parasite, Clara said coldly. "The town's better off without him." "Perhaps," the Reverend agreed. "But parasites, for all their faults, do keep their hosts alive. Without him, the mines have closed, the businesses are failing, good people are suffering. That's not our fault." Elias said. "No," Henry interrupted. "But Martha says you have the means to help. A contribution, she calls it, to help the widows and orphans of Hope's End." Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. "Widows like her, whose husband tried to murder us?" "Please," the Reverend said. "I'm trying to prevent more bloodshed. Martha's stirred up what remains of Morrison's men. They're talking about coming here, about taking what they believe is theirs." "Let them come," Elias growled. "Think of your child," Aldrich pleaded. "Do you want to raise a baby in violence, always looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next group of men seeking vengeance?" Clara felt the baby kick, hard enough to take her breath. The Reverend was right. Damn him. They'd fled to escape this, but the past had followed anyway. "How much?" she asked quietly. "Clara, no." Elias turned to her. "We don't owe them anything." "How much?" she repeated. Henry pulled out a letter. $10,000, delivered to the church in Hope's End. The Reverend here will see it distributed fairly. It was less than half what they had hidden, but still a fortune. Clara took the letter, read Martha's cramped writing. Between the threats and accusations was real pain. A woman left with 3 children and no means of support, in a dying town with no hope. "I need to think," Clara said finally. "Come back tomorrow for our answer." After the men left, Elias paced the small room like a caged wolf. We can't give in to this. It'll never end. Pay one, and dozen more will come calling. And if we don't pay? Clara sank into a chair, exhausted. They come anyway, except this time with guns instead of requests. We've faced guns before. We weren't parents before. Clara took his hand, placed it on her belly. Feel that? That's your child. Elias, our baby. Do we raise it in peace or in war? That night, neither slept. They talked in circles, weighing principles against practicality, justice against safety. By dawn, Clara had made her decision. We pay, she said, but we do it our way. Her plan was clever. They wouldn't send gold, which could be traced and would only fuel more greed. Instead, they'd purchase the old Morrison mine through intermediaries, then deed it to the town itself. The people could work it collectively, share the profits. It would cost them nearly everything they had readily available, but it might buy them peace. And if there's no gold left in the mine, Elias asked, then they'll have learned what we learned, that the real treasure isn't in the ground. Clara smiled sadly. Besides, there's always gold if you dig deep enough. The mountain gives up its secrets slowly. It took a week to arrange everything through lawyers in Portland. Papers were drawn up, funds transferred, all anonymous. The deed would be delivered to Reverend Aldrich for the people of Hope's End. Henry returned as promised, accompanied this time by two hard-looking men who stayed mounted, hands near their weapons. The Reverend was notably absent. Well? Henry asked. Clara handed him a leather portfolio. Everything's in there. The mine, the mineral rights, all legal and proper. The town owns it now, not Morrison's estate, not any individual, the town. Henry opened it, scanning the documents with obvious confusion. This ain't what Martha asked for. It's better, Clara said. Gold runs out. A working mine, owned by the community, can provide for generations. Tell Martha her children will have food, education, a future. Tell her we're sorry for her loss, but we won't be held hostage by the past. One of the mounted men spoke up. This some kind of trick? Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. The only trick is thinking you can threaten a pregnant woman and call it justice. Take what we're offering or leave empty-handed. Those are your choices. The tension stretched taut, rain falling between them like a curtain. Finally, Henry closed the portfolio. I'll take it to Martha. Can't say she'll be happy, but he looked at Clara's obvious condition. Maybe she'll understand. She's a mother too. They left without violence, though Clara didn't relax until they were out of sight. That evening, as she and Elias sat before the fire, she felt the first real contraction, sharp and sudden, stealing her breath. It's time, she gasped. The baby came with the storm, lightning splitting the sky as Clara labored through the night. The midwife from town arrived just as things became urgent, a steady presence in the chaos. Elias held Clara's hand, whispered encouragement, looked terrified and amazed by turns. Just before dawn, as the storm finally broke, their daughter entered the world with a cry that seemed to challenge the thunder itself, small but fierce, with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. Hope, Clara whispered, cradling the baby. We'll call her Hope. Elias kissed them both, tears on his weathered face. Hope Elizabeth Boone, born free. In the days that followed, as Clara recovered and learned the rhythms of motherhood, word came from California. The transfer had been accepted. The Morrison mine was operating again, owned and run by the townspeople. Martha Hutchins had been elected to oversee operations, the first woman in Hope's End to hold such a position. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement of the sacrifice, but there were also no more threats, no more riders in the rain. The past, it seemed, had finally loosened its grip. Samuel arrived a month later, looking older but at peace. He held his niece with hands that shook, this hard man who'd survived so much undone by a baby's tiny fingers. She's perfect, he said, going to break hearts someday, going to break barriers. Clara corrected. This one's gonna grow up in a different world than we did, a better one. They settled into a rhythm, Samuel building a cabin on the adjacent land, helping Elias work their small farm, being the uncle who told outrageous stories and carved wooden toys. The gold remained hidden, insurance against future troubles, but they lived simply, honestly. One evening, as autumn painted the Oregon hills in shades of fire, Clara stood again at the window, Hope nursing contentedly in her arms. This time, when she saw Elias returning from the fields, there was no fear, no checking of weapons, just love and gratitude and the quiet joy of a life hard won. "Your daddy's home," she told Hope, who responded by gripping her finger with surprising strength. Elias entered, kissed them both, smelling of earth and honest work. "Good day?" he asked. "The best," Clara replied, meaning it. They'd paid in blood and gold for this piece, but it was worth every ounce. Outside, the Oregon rain began again, gentle this time, nourishing rather than threatening. And in the warmth of their simple home, the Boone family held each other close, writing a new chapter in a story that had begun with loneliness and greed, but found its way to love. The gold still slept in the earth, in various hiding places known only to them. But the real treasure was here, in a baby's laugh, in the touch of familiar hands, in the freedom to live without fear. They'd learned what so many fortune seekers never did, that wealth wasn't measured in metal, but in moments. And they were rich indeed. The knock came at midnight, sharp and urgent against the cabin door. Hope, now 3 years old, stirred in her small bed, but didn't wake. Clara reached for the rifle as Elias rose, pulling on his boots. "Who's there?" Elias called through the door. "It's Aldrich," came the strained reply. "Please, I need your help." They exchanged glances. The Reverend had been a steady friend since their arrival, never asking questions about their past, never judging. Clara nodded, and Elias unbarred the door. Reverend Aldrich stumbled in, his usual composure shattered. Blood stained his collar, though it didn't appear to be his own. "Forgive me," he gasped. "I had nowhere else to turn." "What happened?" Clara asked, already fetching water and clean cloths. "There's been a shooting. A man, badly wounded. He crawled to the church, seeking sanctuary." Aldrich's hands shook. "He says his name is Frank Morrison, Jake Morrison's son." The name hit like a physical blow. Clara's hands stilled on the bandages. Elias's face went hard as granite. "He's dying." Aldrich continued. "But before he goes, he wants to speak with you, both of you. He says he knows the truth about his father's death, and he forgives you." "It's a trap," Elias said immediately. "Morrison had no children. He had one." The Reverend insisted. "Born on the wrong side of the blanket, raised by his mother in San Francisco. The boy, man now, has papers, letters from his father. He's genuine." Clara looked at her sleeping daughter, then at Elias. They'd built a life here, a good life. But the past, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. "I'll go," Elias said. "Clara stays here with Hope." "We go together or not at all," Clara said, echoing words from long ago. "Samuel can watch Hope." Within the hour, they were riding through the darkness toward town, Samuel standing guard over his sleeping niece. The church sat at the edge of Millbrook, its white steeple a finger pointing toward judgment. Inside, a single lantern cast dancing shadows on the walls. Frank Morrison lay on a pew, wrapped in blood-stained blankets. He was young, maybe 25, with his father's sharp features softened by his mother's gentler heritage. His eyes opened as they approached, clear, alert, despite his condition. "Clara Grayson," he whispered. "Elias Boone, or whatever names you're using now. What do you want?" Elias demanded. Frank tried to laugh, coughed blood instead. "Nothing. That's what makes this funny. Came all this way for revenge. And now," he gestured weakly at his wounds. "Got myself shot by road agents before I could even find you. God's own joke." Clara knelt beside him, her healer's instincts overriding caution. The wounds were mortal, gut shot, beyond any doctor's skill. Why were you looking for us? Spent 3 years tracking down what happened. Found Hutchins' widow. Talked to men who rode with my father. Frank's voice was fading. No, you didn't murder him. No, he brought it on himself, trying to steal what you'd earned. Then why come after us? Clara asked. Because he was my father, only one who ever acknowledged me, even if it was secret. Sent money to my mother, letters to me, told me I'd inherit everything someday. Frank closed his eyes. When he died, it all died with him. Mother took sick, no money for doctors. She died cursing his name, but I still loved him. The church fell silent except for Frank's labored breathing. Finally, he spoke again. Found the canyon, found his bones. Animals had, but I knew it was him. The watch I'd given him for Christmas was still there. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. This dying boy, seeking vengeance for a father who'd been a monster to everyone else but a hero to him. The complexity of human nature never ceased to amaze and sadden her. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it. Your father gave us no choice. I know. Took me 3 years to accept it, but I know. Frank reached into his coat with trembling fingers, pulled out an envelope. This is why I needed to see you. Elias took the envelope carefully. Inside was a deed, to property in Hope's End, Morrison's old house and the land around it. It's yours, Frank whispered. Last thing I own free and clear. Father bought it before he got greedy, before he became what he became. Want you to have it. We can't accept this, Clara protested. You have to. It's justice, balance. You gave the town his mine, gave them hope. Let me give you something clean. Frank gripped Clara's hand with surprising strength. I've got no family left. Let this be my legacy, that Jake Morrison's son chose forgiveness over revenge. He died as dawn broke through the church windows, painting the scene in shades of gold and crimson. They buried him in the church cemetery. Reverend Aldrich saying words over a grave marked simply, Frank Morrison. He chose forgiveness. The deed turned out to be legitimate, properly filed and transferred. But returning to Hope's End, even to claim property, felt like stepping backwards into a nightmare. We don't have to go, Samuel said when they told him. Could sell it through lawyers, never set foot there again. But Clara found herself thinking of Frank's words, of choosing forgiveness over revenge. Maybe we should go, close that chapter properly. Clara, Elias warned, hear me out. We ran before because we had to, but Hope's End isn't Morrison's town anymore. It belongs to the people now. Maybe it's time to stop running from shadows. It took a month to arrange everything. Word was sent ahead, and, surprisingly, they received a formal invitation from the town council, Martha Hutchins among them, welcoming them back to settle Frank's estate. The journey felt like traveling backwards through time. Hope rode in front of Clara, chattering about the mountains and trees, unaware of the weight her parents carried. Samuel rode alongside, watchful as always. Hope's End had changed. The saloon still stood, but cleaner, more respectable. The mine operated steadily. With proper safety measures, Samuel noted approvingly. And the people, they looked healthier, more prosperous. Martha Hutchins met them at Morrison's old house, now standing empty but well-maintained. She'd aged, gray streaking her hair, but her eyes had lost their hardness. Mrs. Grayson, Mrs. Boone, she said formally. Then, unexpectedly, she extended her hand. Welcome back. Clara shook it, wary but willing. Mrs. Hutchins. I owe you an apology. What my husband did, what I tried to do after... Martha looked away. Grief makes fools of us all. The mine you gave us saved this town. My children have food, education, futures. I was wrong. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. Progress. Morrison's house was grand by frontier standards. 2 stories. Real glass windows. Imported furniture. Walking through it felt like touring a tomb. Lot of space for a small family. Elias observed, "We're not staying," Clara said quickly. "Are we?" But as they explored, Hope ran through the rooms laughing, her joy infectious. The house had good bones. Clara had to admit, with work, with love, it could be transformed. "There's something else." Martha said, "In the study. Frank left instructions it was to be given to you personally." The study was dark, heavy with leather and ambition. But in the desk drawer was another envelope. This one older, more worn. Inside, a letter in Jake Morrison's hand. "If you're reading this, I'm dead and you've won. Hidden beneath the floorboards of this room is my insurance. Gold I skimmed from every claim, every miner who passed through. Blood money. My wife called it before she left. Take it or leave it to rot. Either way, know that you've beaten me. J.M." They found it where he'd said, nearly 50,000 in gold coins. A fortune built on theft and intimidation. Clara stared at it, feeling nothing but sadness. "We give it back," she said, "to the families he stole from." Elias nodded. "Through the town council. Let them sort out the claims." They stayed a week, settling Frank's affairs, watching the gold get distributed to widows and orphans and men who'd been cheated. The town embraced them cautiously, gratefully. Even the saloon keeper tipped his hat when they passed. On their last night, they stood in the cemetery where Frank lay. Hope picked wildflowers, placing them on graves with solemn concentration. "Could we be happy here?" Clara asked quietly. "In his house, in this town?" "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But maybe that's not the right question. Maybe it's whether we can help heal this place, make it better for Hope and children like her." Clara thought of their cabin in Oregon, safe and isolated. Then she looked at Hope's End, scarred but healing, a town that needed good people to help guide its future. "The house needs work," she said finally. "New paint, new memories, garden out back for vegetables. School's just down the street for when Hope's older," Elias added. "And Sam could reopen the blacksmith shop." They were talking themselves into it. Clara realized, this town that had nearly killed them, that had taken so much, they were choosing it. Frank would approve, Samuel said, joining them, taking something built on greed and turning it into a real home. That night, in Morrison's former bedroom, Clara and Elias made love with a tenderness born of survival and choice. The ghosts were still there. They always would be. But ghosts could be lived with, integrated into the story of a life. "Are we really doing this?" Clara asked, trailing her fingers across Elias's chest, moving back to Hope's End. "Appears so," he said, kissing her forehead. "Though I think we should change the name. Bad luck, living in a town named for its end." "Hope's Beginning," Clara suggested. "For Frank, for our daughter, for everyone starting over." "Hope's Beginning," Elias agreed. "I like that." Through the window, the moon rose over the Sierra Nevada, the same mountains that had brought them together, in her small bed. Hope slept peacefully, unaware that her parents had just decided to transform a place of death into a home. The gold still waited in various hiding spots, their insurance against future troubles. But Clara found she thought of it less and less. They had what mattered: each other, their daughter, Samuel, a community willing to grow beyond its dark past. Sometimes the greatest treasure wasn't what you found, but what you chose to build with what remained after the searching was done. And in Hope's Beginning, formerly Hope's End, the Boone family would build something worth more than all the gold in California: a future. The cycle of vengeance had been broken by a dying man's forgiveness. Now it was their turn to continue that work, one day at a time, one choice at a time, until the town's name truly reflected its spirit. Hope's Beginning. It had a nice ring to it. Spring came early to Hope's Beginning that year, painting the mountain slopes in wildflowers and promise. Clara stood in the garden behind what had once been Morrison's house, now truly theirs after 5 years of patient transformation. Hope, now 8, helped plant corn seeds while her younger brother Samuel, named for his uncle, toddled between the rows. More hindrance than help. "Mama, why do we plant things we can't eat right away?" Hope asked, her father's serious eyes in her mother's face. "Because good things take time to grow," Clara answered, wiping dirt from her daughter's cheek. "The best treasures aren't found. They're cultivated." Through the kitchen window, she could see Elias and Samuel working on the new schoolhouse addition. The town had grown, attracting families seeking fresh starts, and the little school needed expansion. It seemed fitting that men who'd once hidden from civilization now helped build its foundations. That evening, as they gathered for supper, a knock interrupted their meal. Clara opened the door to find a young woman, travel-worn and nervous, holding a baby. "I'm looking for Clara Boone," she said. "My name is Margaret Henley. My father was Pete Henley. He died in a cave-in years ago, died wearing Samuel Boone's coat." The table went silent. Samuel rose slowly, his face pale. "I remember Pete. Good man. I'm sorry for your loss." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I've been searching for you, Mr. Boone, not for any bad reason." She added quickly, "My father, before he died, he wrote letters, said if anything happened to him, I should find you or your brother. Said you'd help." "Come in," Clara said gently. "You look exhausted." Over tea, Margaret's story unfolded. Her mother had died in childbirth. Her father soon after in the cave-in. She'd been raised by reluctant relatives who'd turned her out when she got pregnant without a husband. "I know it's shameful," she said, clutching her baby. "But I'm a good worker. I can cook, clean, help with children. I just need a chance." Clara and Elias exchanged glances. They'd been looking for help with the household, especially with Clara's work at the new clinic taking more time. "You'll stay here tonight," Clara decided. "Tomorrow, we'll see about making arrangements." Margaret stayed that night, and the next, and soon became part of their extended family. She had her father's work ethic and gentle nature, and the children adored her baby James. Samuel, especially, seemed drawn to her, this connection to the man who'd died in his place. As summer deepened, Elias noticed Samuel and Margaret taking long walks, talking quietly while James played. One evening, Samuel approached him at the forge. "I want to marry her," Samuel said without preamble. "I know it's quick, but when you know, like you did with Clara." Elias smiled. "You asking my permission?" "I'm asking for your blessing. She makes me remember who I was before the mountain made me hard. Makes me want to be better." The wedding took place in autumn, the church filled with townspeople who'd come to respect the Boone family. Clara stood as matron of honor. Hope scattered flower petals, and little Samuel carried the rings with tremendous concentration. That night, as the celebration continued at their home, Clara found herself in the study, Morrison's old sanctuary, now lined with books and children's drawings instead of mining claims. 20 years ago, I was alone in a cold cabin, waiting to die," she said to Elias, who'd followed her. "Now look at us. Family, friends, purpose. Regrets?" he asked, pulling her close. "Never." She kissed him, tasting apple cider in contentment. "Though I sometimes wonder what became of all that gold we buried. Do you ever think about digging it up?" "Sometimes," Elias admitted. "But then I look around at what we've built without it, and I figure it's better left sleeping. Let some future generation find it and make their own choices." A crash from the parlor interrupted them. Little Samuel had knocked over something. From the sound of it, they returned to find him covered in cake, grinning unrepentantly while Hope tried to clean him up. "Your son," Clara sighed. "He's your son when he's covered in dessert." Elias countered, but he was smiling. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were abed, the adults sat by the fire. Margaret nursed James while Samuel whittled a toy horse. The domesticity of it all still amazed Clara sometimes, how they'd gone from running for their lives to this peaceful evening. "I've been thinking," Samuel said suddenly, "about Pete, about debts unpaid." "Sam," Margaret started, but he shook his head. "I want to set up a fund for miners' families. When accidents happen, when men die in the mountains, their families shouldn't suffer." "We have the means." He glanced at Elias and Clara, who nodded. to make sure no child goes hungry because their father sought gold and found death instead. It was decided that night the Henley Boone Fund would be established, quietly supported by carefully liquidated portions of their hidden gold. No fanfare, no recognition, just help when help was needed. As winter approached, Clara realized she was pregnant again. The news filled the house with joy and gentle teasing about needing even more room. But the pregnancy was difficult, and as spring returned, the birth nearly killed her. The baby, another daughter, named Grace, was healthy, but Clara was weak for months. It was Margaret who nursed her back to health, who kept the household running, who proved that family was about more than blood. One night, as Clara finally felt strong enough to walk in the garden, she found Elias sitting on the bench they'd built together, staring at the mountains. "What are you thinking?" she asked, settling beside him. "About circles, how we ran from these mountains. Yet here we are. How the gold brought us together but nearly tore us apart. How Morrison's greed created the very thing he'd have hated most, a family built on love instead of wealth. The treasure was never the gold," Clara said, resting her head on his shoulder. "It was what we were willing to sacrifice for each other, what we were willing to build together." Hope appeared in the doorway, Grace in her careful arms. "Mama, the baby's fussin'?" Clara took Grace, marveling again at this third miracle. In the house, she could hear Samuel, the elder, helping young Samuel with his letters. Margaret singing in the kitchen. Elias following her inside. This was wealth. This was treasure. Not metal torn from the earth, but lives intertwined. Love multiplied. Hope and hope nurtured day by day. Years later, when Clara's hair was silver and Elias's hands were gnarled from decades of honest work, they would sit on this same bench and watch their grandchildren play in the garden. The town of Hope's beginning would have grown into a small city, the mine still operating cooperatively, the Henley Boone Fund having helped hundreds of families. They never did dig up all the gold. Some remained in the mountains, waiting for other souls to find it and face their own choices. But Clara and Elias had learned the truth that eluded so many who came west seeking fortune, that the real mother lode wasn't in the ground, but in the bonds between people brave enough to trust, forgive, and build something lasting. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light turned the mountains to gold, Clara would remember that desperate flight through the Sierra Nevada, that first night in her cabin with a wounded stranger, that moment when she chose love over safety. Every choice had led here, to this garden, this family, this life rich beyond any prospector's wildest dreams. "No regrets?" Elias would ask. "Their old ritual?" "None." Clara would answer, meaning it more with each passing year. The gold might sleep forever in the earth, but the love they'd cultivated bloomed with every season, a treasure that multiplied the more it was shared. In the end, that was the greatest strike of all, not finding wealth, but creating it. One choice, one sacrifice, one act of love at a time, and in Hope's beginning, formerly Hope's end. The Boone family's true fortune grew with each passing day, measured not in ounces but in laughter, tears, and the quiet contentment of lives well lived together. The mountain kept its secrets, but Clara and Elias had found something better, a love that turned loneliness to belonging, greed to generosity, and a widow's empty bed into a cradle of endless possibility. That was the real treasure, and it was worth more than all the gold in California. Thank you for joining us around the campfire for this tale of love, loss, and redemption in the Old West. If you're listening to this story, we'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. Just like the characters in our story connected across the harsh frontier. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of romance and adventure where the dust settles and hearts find their way home. Share your thoughts about Clara and Elias's journey. Did their choice to return to Hope's End surprise you? What would you have done with Morrison's blood money? Until next time, partners, keep your hearts open and your dreams as big as the western sky.